Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the CABE 2020 virtual community and another webinar in a series of special speakers being made available to our CABE 2020 familia. I'm Jan Gustafson Correa, CEO for CABE, and while we really wish we could have been together last month for CABE 2020 San Francisco, we are pleased that we can be with you today virtually. We hope that you are finding yourself in a safe place, continuing to manage the circumstances due to COVID-19, and ready to join your CABE familia today and over the next weeks via the CABE 2020 virtual community website and webinars. So to get us started, it truly is my pleasure to welcome you to my colleague, dear friend, and our CABE board president, Olivia Yaya. Olivia?
Hello and welcome. We're so glad you've joined us. Today's webinar is being presented by an impactful researcher and practitioner in the field of multicultural education, Huda Essa, who was scheduled to be one of our keynote speakers at CABE 2020. We are very honored that she is able to join us virtually today. As we get ready for today's exciting session, I have a few housekeeping matters to share. As this is a webinar, the speaker's microphone will be active and the participant's microphone will all be on mute. If you would like to pose a question during the presentation, please use the chat icon on the Zoom control menu. You'll see it there at the bottom of your screen. Just click it and the chat window will pop up as you can use that to make any comments or ask any questions. For better focus, we will not be using the Q&A icon or the window for today's webinar. After the webinar, we will post the recorded version on the CABE 2020 virtual community website. You can re-listen to it, you can share it with others, and no password are needed. So sit back, relax, and get ready for 45 minutes of powerful online engagement and learning. And now it gives me great pleasure and honor to introduce and welcome Huda Essa, who will be speaking on authentic relationship building from the distance, guidance and resources for use with staff and students. Welcome, Huda.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Olivia. Entire amazing CABE team. If you're behind your screen, they might be able to still hear the applauses somehow. I'm so happy to have you here with me. I was so looking forward to the conference this year, but I do have hopes that, and I feel it in my heart, we're gonna get together in person very soon. In the meantime, you know, this is what we do as educators. We roll with the punches, so we're gonna keep moving. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so we can get started. And I'm excited to begin with you. All right. Okay. So I have to tell you, I was pondering over the list of topics of what I would cover with you. And I tried to think, what would be most timely, relevant, and vital. And I think that one of the things that we're really missing right now is that ability to connect on a deeper level beyond just the screen, and that relationship building could suffer, just not being able to be together. So I want to help you with that. And I think that so many of us are feeling very overwhelmed, and these are just unprecedented times where, we don't know what's going to happen. And it's not just our feelings of what we're encountering now, but also our students and their families. So I wanted to give you something that feels easy. something that's really practical and you can just plug it right into your work with your colleagues, with staff, with your students, of course, and families as well. All right. So, yeah, so you can see I have the title of my TED Talk up here, and this is going to be one of the sources that I'm going to be offering you today. So you'll have this TED Talk, which you'll be able to use with staff, with families and older students, and then I'll also be posting a discussion guide that you can use along with this video, with just prompts you can ask, which will lead to some really great culturally responsive practices. The other resource is my children's book, Teach Us Your Name. And I have created a video of an author reading of the book so that you can easily just go in and share that video. If you have in your lessons with students, you're embedding videos for them to watch, then this is something that you can share with them. They can watch that. And then also I'm offering a discussion guide, and today's webinar too will be going through some prompts that you can ask. So you can use this in different ways. You might want to share the read aloud with the class, and you can pause and ask questions and have them respond, and or you can assign it and then come back and have the, or assign an activity and then come back later and discuss those things. You can also even use this book as a supplement to the TED Talk with adults and your older students. I don't know about you, but I still love a good children's book. And there's a lot of really great gems, and I'm hoping you'll be able to see that today as we pull this apart. So I'm going to actually use some of the pages from one of my books, Teach Us Your Name, to begin sharing how you can use the concept of names to engage your learners. And, you know, one of the really great things about using names is we don't have to worry so much about comfort levels, because everyone has different comfort levels when it comes to talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But everyone has a name, which is really great, right? And we all have some stories behind those names. And I'm going to show you how we can bring about those stories and all the different things names present. So you'll notice on the cover here, the word tell is crossed out and replaced by the word teach. And it's, you know, we have just so much to learn from our names. Our names are such an important part of our identities, and we really want to encourage students and all others to teach us about who they are. You'll see that I taught readers how to pronounce my name right there. So I've got my Huda, Essa, Huda, Essa. I never used to do that, by the way, as a child. I would never correct anyone or teach people how to pronounce my names, both of my names. And, you know, we really want to encourage our students
Huda to sign back in. So please just hold on for a minute or two. It shouldn't take real long, and we'll be bringing Huda back in. So thanks so much for your patience. Thank you.
talking about, so the first and last pages of my book, what I had done is I found names that are common in various places around the world. So they're common there, but they're not all going to be common where you live, right? And I think that this is in itself really offers a lot of great learning opportunities and discussions about, what is a common name, and the fact that what is common is relative, right? Up to other things like social identities, cultural norms, and really starting to have those conversations to build acceptance and respect and learning from one another, and increasing that tolerance to ambiguity as well. So this one page can lead to a plethora of discussions about self-awareness, about bias, diversity, building empathy, and so much more. All right, so this is the first day of school where, this character has a very tricky name, and she's nervous about it. And, most people, not just students, but educators and families and guardians, right? There's at least a little bit of anxiety oftentimes on that first day of school. And for kids who also have a name that's really probably going to be mispronounced, there's this extra layer as well. So there's a lot we could discuss here. But what I want to do is actually take a moment to recognize something that may come up for you. If you are doing this work with, if you're going to go roll this out to staff or to families, something that may come up is the opinion that, placing an emphasis on we try to pronounce them correctly might be giving in to people who are being overly sensitive. And I've heard this before, and I've had people who encounter this. So I want you to be aware that this is an opinion that may arise. Hopefully, your community is beyond that already, where it's just going to be fully embraced, but we need to be open to the different experiences and beliefs. So what I'd like to do is, I could spend all day talking about responses to that opinion, but what I want to do is just prepare you with some really simple answers to that, and that trying to learn how to pronounce your students' names correct, doing the best that you can to do so, is simply best practice for effective communications. Communication experts will tell you, and I'm sure you probably heard this before, that, if you want to have a more personal and meaningful conversation with someone, try to mention their name. Name drop, right? Drop their names in that conversation whenever you can. And it feels more personal, and there's a deeper connection that can build. And then science actually even proves for us that our brains respond in a unique way upon hearing our own names. And it is a unique response that is different than the way that we respond to every other person's name. And if you are someone whose name, first name or last name, is one that is often mispronounced, you know what I'm talking about when I say that when you hear your name being pronounced correctly by someone outside of your family, it feels good. It feels like respect. It feels like love. It feels like family. And isn't that what we want our students, our colleagues, our entire communities to feel when we communicate with them? So that's just my shorter, which turned out to be kind of long response to how you may need to respond to someone who says, why are we going to spend our time focused on this? These kids need to toughen up. Well, best practices, right? So this teacher, she unintentionally butchers the main character's name here. And, we can understand that with any name that is unfamiliar to us, we can't expect to know them all. And we can't expect anybody else to be able to pronounce every name correctly. Names come from all of the different languages, which have different sounds, and we just can't even access all of those language sounds. So it's going to happen. But what we want to do is teach the tolerance of, this name is worth learning, right? What names are worth learning, because some names we may see that seem like they could have been hard. For example, Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci, at first glance, they may look like difficult to pronounce names learning. So we learn them. And we could do the same thing for our students, right? And we're not going to be able to pronounce every sound, but we just do our best. We get as close as we can. But this also speaks to when children won't speak up. Are we making them feel confident enough to do so? And that's what we have to have these conversations. I never corrected anyone, but no one ever really encouraged me to do so. It was the typical, prompt of, if I say it wrong, please correct me. And that was it. But if people talk about like, wow, our names are so important and it's, we can learn so much from them, and we really make that the focus, then you may end up learning, a lot from your students. One of the prompts you could ask students and staff is, what causes people to remain silent when someone makes a mistake about one or more of their identities? This conversation could easily be extended into the detrimental impact of silence on, matters of social justice and equity and inclusion. Now here's the aftermath of that moment, right? So that teacher, she mispronounces the student's name, and the main character whose name is, get ready for it, Kareem Alay Yasinadine, is, she's just feeling really self-conscious and embarrassed. Chances are unlikely that she's learning anything at this moment. And she says so, she says, my teacher continued on with attendance, but the only voice in my head. And she's just, so upset. And she goes into blaming her parents, for naming her this, what she calls an ugly, terrible, weird, and ridiculously long name. So this may allow us to bring up, the topic of socio-emotional well-being of students and how that impacts learning. So, and especially with, today, you've got all of these students at home where many of them may be facing trauma, and it could even be escalated. In Michigan, and we've had higher reports of domestic abuse because, people are at home and there are so many needs that they need that are not being met, and it's causing stress levels to increase, and, children are there. And our human response is usually, fight or flight, right? And for children, they really don't have those options most of the time. And they're going through a lot, I think, for so many of them. So what do? If you can't fight and there is no flight available, they may just check out, right? Disassociate. So what are they doing to do so? So the character, she goes off into her place in her mind, and she's blaming her parents. But maybe, asking your students, what are your coping skills? What are you doing when you're feeling stressed out? Are you, going and playing video games? Are you scrolling through, mindlessly through social media? What are you doing? And then be able to help them build healthy coping skills, because you don't want that checking out and disassociation to end up leading them to doing even worse things that allow them to have that same response. So Kareem Alay Yasinadine, which I have to give you a little side note, that's not what the main character's name started as. This is an autobiography of my childhood. And I just, I changed her name because I thought Huda, a 4-letter name, people may not see that as being really tricky. So I'm going to spice it up. And I gave the character a 20 long name, and it's a combination of my nieces and nephews' names. So it's Kareem, Layla, Yasin, Nadine, and Dean. And I just put them all together. Kareem Alay Yasinadine. Just a little backstory for you. You can share with your students if you like. So the character now, she's saying, you know, no one had ever actually told me that my name was ugly, terrible, and weird, but they didn't have to. I already knew it was. And now she goes into why. And I believe this really speaks so much to how unconscious bias is formed and how important it is that we rewrite that narrative for students. Because she goes into, you know, when we learned about history in school, no famous person shared my name. I would often find my friends' names in books, but my name never appeared. She talks about characters in her favorite TV shows and movies, and they never heard her name. And I want you to consider how this subject of a name not being present could translate into more conversations, deeper conversations about other identities that are not represented or negatively represented, and the impact of that. You know, so where do your students see themselves represented? You know, think about the places. So in leadership, the country leader, our country's leadership, lawmakers, school administrators, you know, school boards, CEOs, who plays the lead roles in most movies and TV shows. You know, who are they learning about as being the greatest to, you know, our nation? Are they seeing themselves? Are they seeing themselves in children's literature? And then, you know, on the flip side, who do they see in the lower level positions? Is that where they see more of their identities being represented? And how does that influence their engagement and their motivation, right? And how does that, of course, translate into achievement levels? So now there's, you know, this more practical issue that comes up where, you know, the character, she's unable to find a bracelet with her name on it. So she has to have one specially made, and her mother is charged additional fees. And this bracelet becomes so long that it becomes this necklace that, you know, she's not going to wear, right? So some questions to consider is what it's for, or that we have to pay additional fees just for being who we are. You know, for example, being bilingual, which is an amazing, beautiful thing, is unfortunately too often viewed as a deficit. You know, so how does the ignorance of others cause unnecessary challenges for people who are just being themselves? You know, and those identities are great, but what do they have to deal with because of others who don't understand that? You know, and how does that carry over to limiting the potential of the greater community in the world? So if someone feels like being bilingual is not something good, which unfortunately is the story of many people and many of our ancestors, you know, which was the cause of the loss of language for so many people, how does that impact all of us now? You know, what have we lost because of so many people who no longer have access to that language and the culture that language that is embedded in that language? So these things really, and talking about them and sharing and learning from one another really needs to be a non-negotiable in learning communities. So here the character is teased for her long name. So of course, you know, you could talk about upstairs. The character goes on to talk about how the teacher and her classmates begin calling her a shortened name. So they start calling her Carmadine. And again, very much my story, right? My name was mispronounced and I never corrected anyone. And this character did the same thing where she just got, you know, she was too shy to correct anyone. So eventually that's just how she even started introducing herself to people. She would use that mispronunciation. So a prompt, again, you know, one of many, could be just, you know, what identities do we feel like we need to alter or diminish in order to succeed, right? Which ones are we just like, it's fine, you know, just keep going. I'll get by. Where actually, you know, not only have we lost an opportunity to share something about ourselves and build that confidence that we should have, but also the opportunity for someone else to have learned from those differences that we have. So now Karima Leah Dean and her family travel overseas on a trip to visit family. And, you know, I purposely never mention the name of a country or what language is being spoken there or anything, because I really want this story to be relatable to many people. And unless you are 100% Indigenous, we are all immigrants or descendants of immigrants or enslaved peoples. You know, all who came from a land other than this one. Now, even if you are of the Indigenous people, you know that this land once looked and felt very different to your ancestors. And this is a really great place to begin those discussions about where do our families originally come from, you know, and help even families when you have these discussions with families and bring them into the conversation. You know, many families need to be reminded of that connection to the immigrant story. Right? You could have the students either alone or with their families. They could learn about that national origin, their cultural traditions, maybe share some positive contributions made by people from their national origins, or, you know, from their race, or those who also speak. Now, you know, something I want you to keep in mind is that you will likely have some staff, students, and families who don't have access to that information, you know, for an array of reasons. You could also have people who do know the answers, but don't know much about the answers. So they could say, well, I know my family name was changed. We just don't know what the original name was. You know, I don't know if any of my ancestors had names that I would think of as being, you know, foreign today, or I don't know when we lost that ability to speak another language, but they know it happened, right? But what's important is to be sure to explain to them that all of the reasons for not having access to those stories give us just as much of a learning opportunity as the ones that do have access to those stories. They're all stories, they're just different ones. So some questions to ponder might be, you know, what was the cause of that lack of knowledge? And was bias or injustices a factor? This relates to various groups of people because, you know, this is a very common story. You will have, for example, someone who's Polish who is able to say, well, you know, I believe we're from Poland, but I don't speak the language anymore. I don't know anything about the cultural traditions. I really don't know a lot about my family history. So although that story is different, you can see some common threads with some other groups of people who may also have been, you know, pressured to lose their cultural traditions or their languages, or in the case of African Americans or the indigenous people, for example, who were literally forced to do away with a lot of those identities. So some other prompts to consider is, you know, why is it important that all people are able to talk about their identities and embrace their differences? How is that beneficial to all of us? And think about how much more successful we would be, you know, as a nation, as a world, if we utilized our diversity as a strength rather than viewed it as an inconvenience. So those and any other learners can choose other options too. So you may have students and their families who say, well, we don't know at all what our national origin is. So allow students to think about, okay, so what makes you you? You know, what are those social identities? Have them start to increase that self-awareness for themselves, and they can choose a different identity. So, you know, in the case of someone who's adopted, for example, you know, okay, so that's great. And we're learning about that identity. Can you find others who share that identity, who have gone on to do really great things, and you can teach us about them? You know, Nelson Mandela, Steve Jobs, right? And so much more. And they can pick different identities. So there's really a lot to work with here. Now, here's when Karima Leasina Dean recognizes that in this other land, because her name was a common name there, she never even thought about it, right? So her grandma is talking to her, and this is where, this is around the time where you meet the matriarch of the family. Again, I pulled select pages, but her grandma asks her about her name, and this is when Karima Leasina Dean says, I've never thought about it. And I really want you to consider how that relates to the concept of how lacking awareness of our privileges results in many blind spots, and it's not purposeful. It's just matter of fact that when you're not encountering the experiences and the challenges every day, you may not be thinking about it all the time, right? But the problem with lacking that awareness is that you may have a limited ability to empathize with others who do face the challenges that we don't encounter. So that's why these discussions are so important. That's where we can learn from one another, from people who do have different experiences. So the character's grandma's name is Sitti in the story. But ask your students, what do you call family members? They can learn different language, words from different languages, and that would be really neat. What do you call your grandparents? What do you call your mom? What do you call, so on and so forth. So other ideas to learn from. So here Sitti teaches Karima Leasina Dean that her name means excellent guidance. Again, that's what Huda means. Huda is actually an Arabic word that means positive guidance, but we plugged in the 20-letter long name. And so she teaches her, your name means guidance, so why don't you guide people for how to use how to pronounce your name correctly? And that's another topic, is meanings of names. There's so much to learn from that as well. So here she goes back to school. It's a new year. Her teacher is really happy to have her come on up and teach that to the class, and she teaches them how to pronounce her name correctly. So us and everyone else how to pronounce their first and last names. They can say it, and we could write our own pronunciation guides of what makes sense to us. Maybe they can create their own pronunciation guides. And the prompt I usually use, or what I was using with my students, would be, teach me to say your name the way your family says your name. And that's when I get that, the golden nugget of that family feeling when they hear their name being said. And I had students from so many different backgrounds, and I couldn't pronounce every name because they come from so many different languages, right? But I worked so hard, and I made sure to do the best that I could, and I would get as close as possible. But the amazing thing was that, young people, it's easier for them to build those language sounds. So my students, even kids who were monolingual, English-only speakers, they were picking up all these language sounds from other languages just from learning their students' names or their peers' names. So it's pretty cool. You could do this immediately, and you can also, have this be something that you go into that new school year with as well. Keep it going. So here, Karima Leasina Dean, she really takes that guidance, the name, meaning guidance, seriously, and she becomes a teacher, the ultimate of guides, as all of you are as educators. And she is changing norms, and you can change these norms, making people be more accepting and value that diversity as the asset that it is. So here she is now. She's sitting, she's got her student there who is teaching everyone how to say his name. She's wearing her necklace with pride now, with her name there. And she says that she went on to write this book. and she sees her name in a book, and there she is actually carrying the actual book. And the story ends with a prompt asking everyone to share their wonderful, amazing, terrific names, to teach us those names. I really hope that this is something that you find useful, where you can carry on this work with, again, staff, students, and families. So finally, the book ends with more names from various parts of the world, and a prompt actually at the end. Let's see if I can get this in here. Yeah. Where it says, now add your name. So students might see their own name, and you may have students who've never seen their names in a book who now see their names, or they might see a name from their language. And if they don't, I usually don't promote writing in books, but in this case, the names are all in ABC order. Kids can go squeeze their names into select class history to house in your schools of, look at all the beautiful names we've had, walk through these doors. And, ultimately my hope is that everyone gets to a point where they begin to see unfamiliar names as ones not to mock or view as an inconvenience, but instead to recognize them as unlimited opportunities to build deeper connections, which will without a doubt, benefit all of us, from staff to students and their families to communities and the world as a whole. So my presentation's coming to a close here soon. We're going to be asking for your questions so I can answer your questions. I've been talking a while here. Before I do that, I'm just going to quickly explain some of the resources that you'll be able to find. So there will be a link to my website, and that link is going to take you directly to a page on my website. It won't be asking you for your email address or your contact information, none of that. It's free resources that I posted there for you. So you'll find a link to my TED Talk. You will find a link to my author reading. Also, you'll find a link to a supplemental guide that you can use alongside the book. You can, of course, use this webinar because I know they'll be storing it. My wonderful CABE team over there is going to have that up there for you, where you can go and access that if you want to go and share the webinar in a professional learning community or your next staff meeting. Pause at certain places and say, so let's talk about this. Here's some questions she asked. Let's talk about it. You can break out into smaller groups or work together as a whole group. You'll also find an education article for staff focused on the topic there. You'll find a supplemental guide to use along the TED Talk video as well. I created that for you. You will find a link to purchase the book if you wanted to, or request discounted multiple copies. And you'll also be able to see the other tabs where my other topics and programs are there, and you can contact me directly as well. And finally, so I have one plea for you. If you are interested in helping more learners to be enlightened by the important messages of this book, please click on the link in the resources to leave your quick review. They are going to paste it into the chat box as well now. If you want to just copy that, paste it into your web browser, and just leave a quick review on Amazon. The more honest reviews there are, the more likely people will get the exposure to that book. And that way, more kids and families and schools and communities are talking about it. That 1 minute it will take you to leave that review can help us to do that. And after you do so, please give yourself a really tight hug that you can consider coming from me and every child and human who will live in a more connected and loving world due to your quick but powerful act of kindness. I appreciate you, and I'm excited to hear your questions. So Olivia, I know you've got those questions hopefully for me.
Yes, a lot of, this is just such a powerful, powerful message. Thank you so much, because it's so needed. for us to really be able to have the tools and as teachers know what to do when things might happen in the classroom. For example, we have several good questions that we have. Let me get just this chat box that keeps on moving on me. And I wanted to, Clara, she is asking, how do we teach students to respond with love and respect when others say or act ignorantly towards them because of their name?
So Olivia, I'm sorry, it
help?
froze. It froze. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so a student, how do we, as a teacher, how do we teach our students to respect or to respond with love to a student whose name might be difficult to pronounce, where the other students are not making fun of them? And this is from Clara. I know we're having a little technical difficulties freezing. I don't know why, and we apologize.
I think I got the gist of it. If I'm wrong, if I missed anything, let me know. But that's a great question, Clara. I say talk about it. Open up the discussions. Share the read aloud video. And I think that the more that we talk about it and we show them every name is beautiful, and wow, look what your name means, and oh, isn't that so neat? Look, we just learned another word in a different language because we learned Olivia's name or whatever it means. The more that we show that excitement for it and we draw those conversations out, they will start to see it as learning opportunities, where it's not something that, oh, that's weird. No, it's like, oh, what can I learn from this student? And we as educators, we're the leaders that can guide that motivation.
Another question comes from Jacqueline, and she wants to know if you can talk about something to share with parents.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I would say, so the TED Talk is one that they can watch, and you can even look at some of those discussion guides, because some of those questions might cross over, where, for example, you may ask, what is your family's national origin? Do you know what your family's national origin is? Do you still carry on any of those cultural traditions? If so, that's great. Can you tell us about some of those? If not, why not? Why do you think that was lost along the way? And the same thing applies for languages. I've had many schools engage in this, where it is a school-wide community effort and the parents get involved too, and they share stories about their names. And it doesn't have to just be, I don't want you to just focus specifically on ethnicity or national origin. Those are great things, but there's also cultural norms, like, maybe it's a popular culture. Maybe it was their parents said, oh, I really loved Farrah Fawcett at that time, so I named my daughter Farrah, so it could be all kinds of stories, and they're all welcome. They're all learning opportunities and ways for people to connect. So absolutely get them into the conversation.
This is a question from Lori. And it says, in some second language classes, teachers assign or have students choose a classroom name from the target language. What are your thoughts about this?
Thank you. That's a great question, Lori. Honestly, that makes me a little sad, to hear that, because I do know that this happens, and I think that it's because people feel like that's the only way that they're going to succeed. But this is why it's important that we have to start changing these norms from now, because there is no such thing as a bad name. There should be no such thing in our great diverse nation of one name being better than another. And not only, one thing to consider is this: what are the names that are considered normal names? Because that's really something to consider. You'll find that most of the times those names are anglicized names. So why is that considered most acceptable? And what what message does that send about everyone else, right? So some things to think about. And, you know, I've actually encountered a lot of people who tell me their teachers themselves told them, you need to change your name. So we have to change the discussion around that. We need to show them that, no, your name is your identity, and that is invaluable, not just to you, but to us. We have so much to gain from learning about your names.
Thank you so much, Huda. I mean, we could go on and on, but I want to let all the participants know that we are going to have all the questions given to you, and we will be posting the answers. It's just great conversations going on right now. This has just been so motivating and informative. And I think it's something that is very much needed, that we need more and more of this. So we're just so thankful that you were able to join us with this powerful addition to our CABE 2020 virtual community webinar series. So today's webinar can be accessed by you and everyone else, for that matter, on the CABE 2020 virtual community website at www.cabe2020.org. Keep checking the CABE website for more exciting webinars. On Monday, May 11th at 2 o'clock, we will be launching a series of teacher strategy webinars, and our first will be highlighted by Dr. Ivania Soto. You can sign up for it at a different location and on the CABE webpage. Just go to www.gocabe.org. Again, that is www.gocabe.org. Again, a big thank you to you, Huda, Essa, and most importantly, thanks to all of you for joining us today and here at our CABE 2020 virtual community. On behalf of the CABE Board of Directors and the entire CABE team, we genuinely hope that you have felt that CABE connection, inspiration, and love, just that we were together there in San Francisco at our CABE 2020 conference. Please stay safe, please be well, and remember that together we are CABE strong. See you next time. Hasta la próxima. Have a safe and blessed day. Bye.